that it comes from revelation, then the consequence of those two pieces of information is that you're going to go to revelation to learn the details of how the universe works and what exactly is expected from you. That's not the philosophy, though, right? The philosophy is what comes before that. And that's what I'm trying to differentiate. Things we're not going to talk about in this course, not because it's not important, but it's just because they don't define the ideology. They don't define how it is that we see the world from a bird's eye view. Like how do you, which is what this course is designed to do. The goal of it was to make sure that, especially university students who go into that, take that step in their lives, and they enter into a realm of people who are well educated and talk a lot about these things from different perspectives, or perspectives very different than the ones that we have. And when they're interested in Islam, they're not interested in Islam in terms of just the practices or the general belief system, but they're interested to know what exactly is Islam solving. Like what theory does Islam carry that makes it superior to other systems of life that already exist? Why would we drop our economical system and adopt that which is principled in Islam? Why would we get rid of our moral code and take that which is embedded within Islamic law? Why would they do that? So understanding the basis of these disciplines and these rankings are of extreme importance in order for us to have the discussion about why Islam is a solution, why Islam is the answer for a lot of the questions that the world has not been able to answer, is through these arguments, and not through the arguments that usually occur within the masses. That's not what's going to shift the needle. It will draw people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Da'wah is going to do that for sure. But to actually get for people يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا, to have like that effect, which is what we hope to have, which is what we are aimed to have. Sometimes people get so caught up in apocalyptic narrations that they don't even think about that anymore. It's like, oh, that's not going to happen, so we're just waiting for Dajjal and all that. Make sure that you don't allow prophecies that you study to ruin the way your brain works and the way that you see this. Our obligation as Muslims is to spread Islam to every corner of the earth. And our goal is to try and get everyone to become Muslim and everyone to appreciate the beauty of what this system is. And for this system to be or for this ideology to be the basis, the moral basis of every economical, social, and political system in the world. And that will bring prosperity to people and bring justice and it'll bring rahmah. That's what we're trying to do. That's theoretically what we should be trying to do. But I can tell you that we are not trying to do that. Most Muslims aren't even thinking about that. It's not even a part of their thought process in any way, in any form or manner. And that to me is a huge drift away from what the ideology is actually about. It's a universal ideology that aims to spread that everywhere. And if we're not rigged that way, if we're not thinking that way, then what exactly are we doing with it? And I challenge some of these norms that we have. Muslims are very boxed into their own lives and their small communities, and goals that are not even necessarily goals. Like we tend to have goals, like as Muslims, that aren't necessarily even Islamic goals to begin with. Like I'm going to talk about at the end of the series, governance is not a goal. Governance is a consequence. It's a need. It's a response to a need that may exist at some point, but it's not the goal. We're not trying to dominate. That's not what Islam is trying to do. If you don't understand that, or if somehow you're led to believe that it is, then that's a change in the basis of the ideology that is extremely heavy. That will deviate. That will send people in very different directions. Which is why I think this is so important to understand and to study. So today, inshallah, we're going to be talking about the financial and social philosophy of Islamic thought. Quick reminder before I get into this. Maqasid al-Sharia, or the outcomes of the law, which is a term in Islamic thought, is very important. Maqasid al-Sharia is where most of Islamic philosophy is derived from. Like most of the work that I'm sharing with you is taken from those who wrote in Maqasid al-Sharia, whether it's Imam al-Shatibi or Abu Hamid al-Ghazali or Shaykh ibn Taymiyyah, all these scholars who wrote in Maqasid al-Sharia. This is where we get philosophy from, because it talks about the outcomes, it talks about the purposes of Islam and the goals of it. And I will summarize pieces of that at the end of this course, inshallah, on the last day, if inshallah my time allows. Today we're going to talk about an aspect of Islamic philosophy that I think is probably the most impactful today in comparison to others. Like Not to say that the morality is not, in fact, no, it's still ahead of it, but what people are interested in today. Like, this is what people are listening to, whether we like it or not. You talk about morality, most people aren't listening. Like they switch off quickly when you start talking or speaking about ethics. It's not very interesting to them. However, when you speak about financial systems, right, or the economy, suddenly everyone perks up and wants to hear, and they want to know more about because we've become so materialistic, and everything is about the number in the bank account, and how you preserve it, and how you protect it, and how you can increase it, and how you can grow it, and how you retire at 45, and how you can go like all these. This is so when you talk about the economy, suddenly they're listening, and the social system is attached to it, which is why we use the term socioeconomic status when we refer to people's well-being. It's these two terms are hard to differentiate. However, if I were to do this appropriately, if I was going to do this appropriately, then the financial system would be separate from the social system, and they require each their own approach. And quite frankly, I think you appreciate at this point that each of these lectures is really just an extremely dense introduction to what would require 4 to 5 lectures easily, just to be able to give it to do it justice. It's not that I have a lot to say. To do this justice, to actually cover the pieces that are there, that I didn't shave off from these talks, would take much more time, and rightfully so, because we're talking about we're talking about the bigger picture here, how to understand Islam in the larger scheme of things. So let's try and Bismillah and go through this and see what we can do, inshallah. So the basic framework that I'm going to try and follow, but maybe not word for word as in slide for slide, but this is what I'm trying to follow for you. So in order for us to be able to talk about a financial system or a social system, you have to have a theory of human nature. We've already talked about that, but that's needed. When an ideology presents its economical theory, it wants to talk about how markets should function and how we're going to run the financial system within a country or for a population. The first thing they have to offer is what their theory of human nature is, because that's going to dictate a lot. If we were different, and if we functioned differently, then we would need different markets. But because the way we are, because we are greedy, and because we don't necessarily know how to regulate our own desires and temptations, because we worry about wealth, because we want as much as possible of it, because we tend to lose our morality when we are in need of wealth or when we're trying to pursue more wealth. Because of that human nature that we have, then the markets are going to look a certain way, and the system that's going to govern us is going to look the same certain way. But you change that human nature, and then you'll find a completely different system that would be more suitable. Which is why Islam, in the systems that it produces or suggests or theorizes, it is always doing it with human nature in mind. The way the Quran talks about everything is in keeping with how we are as human beings. Not ideally, but generally speaking. Islam talks about the ideals, meaning how we should be, but then the Quran is very good at identifying how we are, aside from how we should be. If you're going to base things on how we should be, you're going to fail the system. If you're going to base a school, or you're going to build a school, and you're going to base it on the best student, you're going to plan everything for the best student, the school is not going to work. You have to be able to plan out how you're going to teach based on the Prophet ﷺ, the one who's going to be the worst, the student who has the least information. You have to have channels for those who are more advanced. But if you plan everything, keeping it or thinking or fantasizing that everyone's going to be at their best behavior, then it's not going to work. Running a masjid, if I'm going to fantasize that everyone's going to, follow the rules and park appropriately and walk in, then I'm going to absolutely fail. I have to factor in that no one's going to listen to a word we say, that everyone's going to do whatever the heck they want, and they're going to come and put their car right at the front of the masjid if they're allowed to, so they can leave the masjid right into their car seat and leave. It comes down to understanding human nature. It's not bashing people. It's not looking down. It's saying, this is our nature. We're extremely opportunistic and we're very greedy. And we don't really care how other people feel unless we are put into situations to do so. That's why we talk about the moral code first. Because if the moral code kicks in, if it kicks in and people start to elevate, if people start practicing moral elegance, and they start caring about these things on their own, and you have an inner regulation within a moral society, then a lot of that changes. But you can't factor that in. You can't say that's how it is. You can say that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're going to aim for. That's how we're going to judge people and ourselves. But then when we plan for everything else, for the finances and for the social contracts and for governance, we're going to look at it differently. When we talk about physical health and mental health, we're going to assume the worst so that we can make sure no one gets left behind, leaving obviously options for everyone to elevate in their choices. Theory of value, moral foundation, the view of ownership, the stance on risk and uncertainty, institutional structure, distribution theory, and end goals. So I'm going to try and cover these in a little bit of a more sporadic manner, but this is the proper framework to study a financial system. Not that I am a specialist in economy. If it wasn't for my wife, I would be sitting here in a bag. So I don't really know how to manage money, but I can talk to you at least about how how Islam explains its view on money, on wealth. So number one, first we'll talk about ownership, because this is very important. Islamic philosophy begins by explaining to us that we are not really the owners of this. Ultimate ownership is for the divine, subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are entrusted with it. And that is a huge, huge philosophical change of course. That's a different lane altogether. This heavily impacts how Islam sees economies. Because we are not, we are owners. This is not taking away from private property. No. Private property is fully accepted in Islam. It's fully recognized, it's protected, it has legal enforcement behind it. But when we talk about it from a metaphysical perspective or philosophical perspective, you don't really own these things. You're entrusted with them. This is an amana that you carry. The ownership belongs to Allah. That changes things, because that says that I can't do whatever I want with it because I don't really own it that way. I can't do anything I want because it's mine. It's not really mine in that sense. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what I'm going to do has to keep in mind the real owner and what he would want or not want to do. That makes sense? It's very different. You own the car, but it's not really yours. This belongs. This is a part of the cosmic matter that exists. It belongs to God. So when you're going to use it or utilize it, then you have to do that in according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. Actually, the Quran repeatedly frames human beings as khulafa. They are stewards. They are caregivers. They are entrusted with things. They're entrusted with the strength or the power or the wealth that they are given. It reshapes economy. You do not absolutely own wealth in modern liberal sense. You are entrusted with it, and that forces the moral condition. It forces there to be a moral condition. Meaning, yes, I own it, and I have ownership on it, and I have a full tasarruf. I can make my choices, but you are conditioned by the morals that dictate society. The morals that are theocentric, that come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's His. It's not really yours. You see, this is very important. This is a central piece of understanding Islamic economy. That we don't really own this stuff. This belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are granted it, and that's the truth, obviously. Even if you're not religious, you could argue that it's not really yours because you're going to die at some point, and the moment you die, you cannot own anymore. Dead people can't own things, right? It's not yours. So at best, it's going to be yours for maybe a few decades. But then after that, it's not going to be yours anymore. And that being said, that means your ownership is not absolute. It is conditioned, if not by morals, it's conditioned by time. Like even if you're not religious, this concept still applies, because your ownership is conditioned by time. If it's conditioned by time, then it should be acceptable for it to be conditioned by something else, right? So for us as Muslims, we know it's conditioned by time, but we are arguing that it's also morally conditional. There's a moral condition that applies to your ownership of things. You own it, it's yours. I can't come and claim anything, but there's a moral condition. And this is going to become clear in a moment. In a moment, you'll see what I mean by this very clearly. The example will be extremely obvious to you, inshallah ta'ala. Number two, second, wealth. Speaking about wealth, because these are terms that are important. When you talk about an economic system, how do you understand ownership? Right? I explained how we see ownership. There is private ownership is fully recognized and protected and legally enforceable, right? But there's a moral condition to it. If you talk about the socialists, you'll find a different answer. There's a different answer if you live in a socialist country. I lived in a socialist country. Syria, up to the war, we were called in Arabic, they used the word, because socialism or communism in Arabic is shiyu'iyya.
right? They decided that was too obvious. It's a red target on the back. So they just removed the word and used ishtiraki instead, right? And the Ba'athiyin in Iraq did the same. So it's really not, it's just semantics. It's absolutely semantics. Nothing changed. Like this, no one removed a letter from the constitution or the economic system. We just changed what we're going to call it. So we lived in communism. What it means is that you really don't own anything at all. And at any moment, what you have can be taken away. You have cash. They can decide at any moment that the currency is now gone. Like there's no this is you throw it in the Sobia. Yeah, just use it because you use it to bring yourself some warmth because it has no value. They can tank the currency anytime they want. They can decide that this is something that the community, this country uses. So they'll appraise it on their own, pay you a few nickels, and then take away something that you built yourself. So socialism has its blind spots. So I'm just giving an example of when we say that then Muslims, that Islamic philosophy, it recognizes private property with moral conditions. This is very specific because capitalism doesn't do that. There's no condition of anything. You own it. You own it. And if you wanted to own it after you're dead, you could own it. There are ways to keep something within your name after you pass away because of the private property is absolute with no conditions at all. Obviously, a lot of these, when I'm saying that, I'm talking about the extreme versions of communism and capitalism. Today, none of the countries that use capitalism or communism are using these versions of it. They're using refined versions that allow for a lot more flexibility that is much more similar to what Islam is talking about, but with some very clear differences. So second, how does Islam see wealth? So wealth is not an evil thing, which is a common, and I put that there just because it's a common, sometimes I feel like Muslims will misunderstand what's being said in the Quran or in the Sunnah and try to interpret it as to say that wealth is a bad thing. No, wealth is not evil. It is not spiritually dirty. It's not a bad thing to have. The Prophet ﷺ was a merchant, and most of the Sahaba were, and many of them were quite wealthy, like Abu Bakr and Uthman and Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. Hatta Umar was well off. It was only a few of the Sahaba who struggled financially for different reasons. They were too young. They got on board with the Prophet ﷺ's da'wah too young, and they never had time. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu and Jabir ibn Abdullah and Abu Hurairah. They have stories to explain why it was that they didn't do well financially. But the majority of the Sahaba did reasonably well. They were very generous with what they had, and they had zuhud, but still, speaking of ownership, they owned things. Many, and this is an important trade, for example, is something praised in the Quran. Talking about bay'a and tijara, and a good tajir and a good merchant is someone who is held in the highest regards within our deen. However, wealth is morally neutral. Its value depends on acquisition and ethical use. So wealth itself, there's no morality attached to it. It's not dirty, it's not evil, it's not bad. It's just neutral. It's how you acquired it, how you got it, and what you're going to do with it. The ethicality enters that piece. That's what's going to dictate the value of this wealth that you have, and how it's going to be seen legally, how it's going to be seen morally and socially. There's a distinction within our deen that's very, very clear between a lawful gain of wealth and exploitative gain. This is the majority of what the books of fiqh and usul will talk about. Like if you study mu'amalat and buyu', in every book of fiqh, it's a sizable part of the text. It talks a lot about buyu'. Granted, today a lot of it is outdated because these books were written 800, 900 years ago, and the markets look very different, and the way people bought and sold, and it was very different. But still, you'll find that this piece is what they're talking about. Was this gained lawfully, or was it exploitative? Because exploitative gain is something that's not only frowned upon, but it is prohibited. And the Islamic law is designed to provide rulings to differentiate between the two, and differentiate how you're going to deal with the two. Lawful gain versus exploitative gain. And I'm not saying, I used a very specific term here, exploitation. This is the key term that we carry within the deen. You use the word haram, haram gain, fine, but how do you define that? Maqasidiyan, from an outcome perspective. How do you define that this gain is haram? Well, aside from the thing that you're buying being haram, it's really, was there any degree of exploitation, of vulnerability, or of ignorance, or of any other law that you were able to manipulate through the process? Let's talk about riba, for example, because this is one of the cornerstones of understanding wealth within Islam. And it's not simply charging interest. And I find it really tiring sometimes to have these discussions with those who don't comprehend this. Not every word of, by the way, not every word interest in a contract in the West means riba. Not every time. A lot of the times it doesn't mean that. It's just how they're going to calculate what you're going to pay if you're not going to pay it all up front. So they sometimes, and this is, and al-bay' ila ajal in Islam is acceptable. So if I'm going to sell you this computer and you're going to pay me all at once, it's 1,000. If you're going to pay me over time, it'll be 2,000. So that's an interest rate of 100%. So that's not riba. That's just because you're not paying all at once. It's going to be more. It's going to cost you more, and that is absolutely fine within the majority of Islamic jurisprudence systems, right? Because it's not going to increase with time. It's just you have the cash on you is 1,000. No, you're going to give me 200 every month. Then it's going to be 2,000. We agreed on its worth before we started the transaction. We agreed how much it's going to cost you before the transaction, and to give you two different prices is not riba. This is not riba, and when sometimes the word interest is used, and that's what it's describing. I'm not saying every time it's used, that's what it's describing. I'm just saying sometimes it is. So be careful within Western contracts, because the Western economical system does not, or stopped recognizing riba. It did. It did at the beginning, because the Western Constitution, whether we're talking the States or Canada or even parts of Western Europe, were built on the Judeo-Christian moral codes. I mean, it was built on understand. Riba is a part of the Torah and the Injil till this day. Usury is absolutely, it's there. And it's actually talked about in the Torah a lot. And the Jews know it very well, but they just learned how to play around with it. So, meaning they see the law of usury only to apply amongst themselves. Meaning I can't do riba with another Jew, right? But no, it's okay. You think I'm being unfair? Go look it up. If you think I'm unfair, if I'm just saying, go look it up. They don't allow usury amongst each other. But with you, you're a Gentile. They can do usury with you. It doesn't matter. So look it up if you don't believe me. It's not bashing. It's just this is their system. I'm trying to prove to you or show you that the Islamic philosophy, the system, is superior, is better. So this is why I'm explaining this to you. Riba is not simply charging interest. In the modern banking sense, no, that's not what it is. It's philosophically represents, memorize this red, it was in red, an unearned, risk-free profit extracted from someone's vulnerability. That is what riba is. It's an unearned, meaning you didn't really do anything for this. For this transaction specifically, you didn't perform a service of any sort, aside from making wealth available. That's not a service. Islamic, that's not seen as a service. It's seen as a service here. I made this money available to you. It's seen as a service. In Islam, it isn't. It's unearned. If I'm asking you for a loan and I'm giving you the loan, this is not really a service. Islam does not see loans to be services. Doesn't see it to be a transactionable service. It's not something that you can charge for. This is normal. Why? Because we are a society built on morality. So when someone is in need, and they're not asking for a handout, then to lend it and get it back is the norm of what every moral society will do. So if you're charging for it, it's seen as unearned. Risk-free, which is the key term here. The key term is risk-free. Risk-free profit. If you have risk-free profit, then we're in trouble, because it can be extracted from the vulnerability of someone else, from someone who is vulnerable. It's all about assessing risk, and there has to be some equilibrium in the carrying of risk within any economical system. I can't have all the money and carry. Here's where riba becomes a problem. If you don't have money and I do, and I lend you the money, and I'm going to get more than what I actually gave you. And it's going to appreciate as time goes on, and if you're late, I get more and more and more. This means that I have all the money, and you don't, and I carry none of the risk, and you carry all of it. This system is rigged in a way where 9 times out of 10, you're going to get in trouble. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be poorer than you were to begin with. Why? Because if I have all the money, and I carry none of the risk, and you have none of the money, you carry all of the risk, then you can see that the whole thing is not balanced to begin with. And that's really where this comes from. Now, Now, when you have these discussions with economists, they'll say, no, well, it's not really that because you do run the risk of bankruptcy. And not in modern day system. Not really, because the way it works is that there is always collateral and there's always insurance attached to it. So you're not really running a risk, not a real one, that is, or not one that is calculable. And it's not comparable to the risk that the person who is taking the money is running, because that's really what I care about. I don't care about what the general risk is. There's always risk in life. Life in itself is just one big risk. Just being alive. The moment you took a breath, you're at risk. Unless you're a rock, you have risk. Dead things, they don't run risk. If you're alive, you run risk. There's always going to be. But is it comparable to the other person, to the person who's actually asking for the loan? Wealth should be generated through productive activity, shared risk, and real economic participation, not guaranteed through growth, through asymmetrical power, because this is what riba ends up being. It's asymmetrical power. Think about it this way. If I have all the money and you have no money, in order for it to be fair, I should at least carry half the risk. And even then, it's not fully fair, but it's closer to it if I'm carrying at least half the risk. If you think about it, all the money is here, and with all the money should be all the risk, because you have no money, then why are you carrying risk? If you have no money to begin with, you have nothing to pay up with. Where do you think slavery came from? It wasn't war. There's not enough wars have happened historically to explain the amount of slavery that occurred. A lot of slavery, especially in the Arabian Peninsula. In the Arabian Peninsula, and maybe I can't speak for every other part of the world because I actually haven't looked into this that deeply to know what the percentage is. But within Arabia, the majority of enslavement happened through riba. Meaning the person accumulated so much debt that there's no hope of them ever paying it back. So the only way they pay back with themselves. They're the collateral, right? I owe this much money. I'll never pay it back. Fine, now you own me. And khalas, now we're even now. And sometimes they wouldn't even be even. Sometimes the master would accept because there's actually a price on human beings, and the debt that you carry is more than what your worth is. So you're going to work. I'm going to own you. You're going to work for me, and you're going to pay me back the debt that you still owe me. And this was generated primarily from riba, which is why the Prophet ﷺ, at the end of his life, he ended it. And he didn't allow for ongoing riba contracts to exist, meaning if you owed someone something, and it's a riba contract that existed before Islam, or existed even after Islam, but before this moment, it was going to be annulled at that moment. And he started with the riba of Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, as the famous narration has within it. Because Al-Abbas was a wealthy man, and everyone used it, but it wasn't just Al-Abbas, everyone was doing it. But usury was ended with the Prophet ﷺ beginning that day before 3 months before he died, he annulled all of it. Why? Because of the fact that you're looking at a system that is absolutely unbalanced. The risk-free profit becomes a problem. If money just generates more money, then how is that going to? Then the rich get richer, and the poor, the odds are stacked up against them. They're going to get poorer. It has to be done in a way where the poor, the one who doesn't have wealth, the odds are at least reasonably even, so that they have a chance of leaving poverty. It's not about taking wealth from the wealthy. It's not about taking their wealth. It's about growth of wealth that is unearned, that is risk-free profit. You can't say at any point that I want to be in something with risk-free. I want no risk in this. That doesn't exist. You want to grow your wealth, you have to accept a certain degree of risk. This is Islamic philosophy within finances. You have to accept risk. You cannot say, I don't accept risk. I want to put me in something that is risk-free, or as risk-free as possible, because the concept doesn't really work. You have to carry a reasonable amount of this risk. Usury basically is just you put your money, and your money just grows more and more money. It just keeps on growing money. You have a lot of money. If you don't really go on endeavors and you just leave it, it'll just keep on growing money. That means there's no way for anyone else. There's no room here for others to grow, because now that you have it, you're always going to have it, and it's not going to stay stagnant. It's going to keep on growing with no risk that you carry on your side. So that's third, the distribution and social justice. These are the three main pieces that we have to understand when we're studying an economical system. Islamic thought does not aim for strict equality of outcome. It does not. We don't believe in equality of outcome. We recognize that inequality is a part of life, that someone's going to be ghani and someone's going to be faqir. They're going to be rich people and poor people. It's normal. It's a part of life. It is within the design that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put on earth. That we're not arguing that. We're not saying that no, everyone should have the exact same amount of money. No, that's insane. No one's saying that. That's not what Islam sees. That's not what Islam is asking for. Equality of outcome is not the goal. In socialism, at least early socialism and early communism, that was what they were trying to explain, that everyone should have which obviously doesn't work. And which is why capitalism became much more attractive. It became much more attractive to whom? To those who work hard. Socialism is attractive to people who don't want to do anything. If I'm not going to put any effort, it's very attractive. I will live equally to the person who's going to work day and night. That's amazing. You guys saw what happened in COVID. This is what happened in COVID. Now everything is times 2. Because once the idea of we'll give you a little bit of wealth to help you through these difficult times, everyone stopped working. He all sat down and took in money. And those who are working, obviously, are paying for that. They get disgruntled, so they're less likely to pay their taxes honestly. So they start holding back some of that money, hoarding it, or sending it overseas, or putting it somewhere else. Because they don't want to do that. I don't want to go to work every day. I worked every single day through COVID. We did as well. Those who are working, we worked every day. I worked beyond every day. I got COVID 3 times in the Emerge. There are people who got the vaccination before I did. I was working in Emerge. There was some wealthy guy sitting in a tower somewhere who had the COVID vaccination, and I was in Emerge. I didn't have it yet. I couldn't get it. Right? So why would I want to participate in this? Why would I want to pay? I don't want to do that. Show me how I can get out of it. Show me how I don't have to pay. I'm just explaining to you how the mentality becomes. This is what it becomes. Right? Because there's a problem. So Islam doesn't believe in that. No, Islam believes that there's going to be an inequality. That's the norm. So we're not aiming for equality of outcome. It strongly rejects structural deprivation, though. That is what it rejects. It rejects the system being rigged in a way that works against the poor or the disadvantaged. And you can find that very clearly in Surah Al-Hashr, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the fate was what the army would gain in bounty without lifting a sword. Like if they went and there was no battle, but there was a bounty left behind, yani wealth. That wealth was called fate, not ghanima. Ghanima, there had to be a war. You had to clink and clank with your swords. And in that case, only 1/5 of that goes to the state or goes to the fuqara and masakin. But if you went to, if there was no war at all, وَمَا أَفَاءَ اللَّهُ عَلَى رَسُولِهِ مِنْهُمْ فَمَا أَوْجَفْتُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ خَيْلٍ وَلَا رِكَابٍ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُسَلِّطُ رُسُلَهُ عَلَى مَنْ يَشَاءُ. It goes all to the fuqara and masakin. You don't have any claim on it. Why? كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ. So that wealth does not become circulated amongst the wealthy. So it doesn't come restricted only to the wealthy. So you have a complete division in society. You have the wealthy, and money will always exist there. And you have the poor, and they will always not have money. And the whole system is designed to make sure that they stay that way. Islam is saying, no, we cannot allow there to be structural deprivation. I mean, a system that is rigged in a way that is designed not to allow them out. No, we can't allow that. We're not aiming for equality of outcomes. No, there's always going to be a difference. But we can't have a system that is rigged in a way where people will never leave this situation. They're always going to be there. That's not acceptable either. So the economical system and philosophically has to be designing itself. That's why riba is haram. Because riba is structural deprivation. It's going to make sure that the faqir will continue to be faqir. If the odds are stacked against you, and there are 10 of you, then the majority of you are going to get poorer. This is just statistics, right? Maybe you're smart, maybe you're poor, but you're smart, and you'll be that 1 out of 10 who takes the money, who takes that risk, and makes the wealth, and becomes and goes from a low socioeconomic, goes to middle class or upper middle class or even beyond. But what about the 9 other people? They're all going to become poorer, and they're all going to get into a worse situation. This is the problem in the system. The system when it's stacked that way. There are percentages removed from every publicly earned wealth and private stagnant wealth for the less fortunate. That's the way wealth distribution will occur in our deen. Any publicly earned wealth or private stagnant wealth there's going to be a percentage that's going to go to the less fortunate. Those two are going to be looked at very heavily. So publicly earned, meaning if the country earns wealth, then a lot of that's going to the fuqara. Yeah. Or if there's private stagnant wealth. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And the mechanism for this in our deen, primarily, we talked about riba and why it's unacceptable. It's risk-free profit, unearned. In an exploitative manner, you're exploiting the vulnerability of human beings. They're vulnerable. I have no wealth. I'm vulnerable. I'm exposed. I have no wealth. So I need you to help me. So you're like, I'll help you. I'll give you 1,000. You owe me 1,500. And if you're late, you owe me 2. Okay, and if you're late, you're going to owe me 2,500. The odds are stacked against me. I'm going to go into more and more debt. I'm going to have to work even harder, and I will work jobs that are not that have no dignity in them, right? And I'll maybe even do criminal activities. And maybe I'll come back to you because you own so much, because I owe you so much, and I'll do whatever it is that you want just to forgive some of it, or to give me more time, or to lessen the interest rate, or whatever it is. So you start messing with the moral code of society altogether. And others become extremely powerful and extremely rich, and others don't. Well, what is the solution? One of the solutions that we have is the concept of zakat. It's a mandatory wealth redistribution system. It's not just casual charity. No. It's not casual charity. This is a right of the poor and the wealth of the affluent, or the wealth of the wealthy. It's a right. Meaning if you have wealth sitting in your bank account for a year, some of that wealth is no longer yours. You don't own it. It's in your bank account, but it's not yours anymore. You don't own this anymore. I'm talking about ownership, it's not yours. If 12 lunar months go by and they're sitting there, there's a percentage of that wealth is not yours. If you are working in agriculture, if you own livestock, if you're a merchant and you're sitting on assets to be sold, if a year goes by, it's not yours. There's a percentage here that is owned by others in the eyes of God and enforced by law. Right? Within the Islamic system, it would be enforced by law. It would be taken and passed over to those who are deserving of it, the 8 recipients of zakat. For example, Bayt Mal al-Muslimin, a good piece of understanding, or a helpful piece of understanding how wealth is distributed in our deen, is understanding Bayt Mal al-Muslimin, that zakat goes to a fund. And from it, the Muslims will be taken care of. It's Bayt Malihim, it's the house of their wealth. This is the literal translation of it. The house of wealth of the Muslims, or the Muslim house of wealth. What does that mean? That as a Muslim, you don't have wealth, but there is a house of wealth that is for all of you, that you're able to tap into, that will allow you that will give you loans, that will invest in your work, that will make sure that you have your basic needs. This is a big part of how Islam functioned. Bayt Mal al-Muslim was a big deal during the Khilafah al-Rashida, the Umayyads, the Abbasis, and those who came later. Having Bayt Mal al-Muslimin was a central piece of if the Khilafah wasn't able to hold Bayt Mal al-Muslimin, protect it, make sure that it was that every dime that went into it they were accountable for, then this is where revolutions began. Wars amongst people would occur, because this is the most important economical piece that the Muslims had, was Bayt Mal al-Muslimin. That framing of there being Bayt al-Mal and zakat being a mandatory right within the wealth of the affluent to those who are disadvantaged is an absolute change in the philosophy of economical systems. This is very specific to us as Muslims in a way that I don't think there are parallels to be drawn to other faiths, because it transforms generosity, it transforms what you give from generosity to justice. It's no longer that you're a generous person. This is haqq. This is adl. You have $100,000 in your bank account. It sits there for a year. 2,500 of that is no longer yours. It's not. You don't take that money and give it as. It's not charity. I'm taking it from you. It's not an option. You want to be generous? You be generous with the $97,500 that are left. So you can be as generous as you want with that. But this money is no longer yours, because it's a haqq. And that's how Islam is. And I'll explain in a moment why that's so important. So fourth, the moral psychology of economics, which is the last piece that I think is worth sharing here as we talk about it. Islamic philosophy is acutely aware of greed. Again, understanding human nature, where there's a lot of greed that exists. It treats unchecked accumulation as spiritually corrosive. So if you just keep on accumulating wealth with no evidence of you utilizing it in a way that is helpful for others or communally beneficial, or it's long-term planning for the environment or for the country that you're living in or for your family, for example, is seen as something that is spiritually harmful to people. Hoarding with wealth without circulation is heavily criticized. It's actually why zakat is there. You could go through your whole life and never pay zakat and never be at fault. If you don't hoard wealth, like if you keep the amount of wealth in your bank account less than the nisab, less than 85 grams of gold, the worth of 85 grams of gold, and you make wealth and you buy things, or you invest it, or you build a company, or you and you start a business, then you can go through your life and never pay zakat, and you wouldn't be held accountable, because zakat, it's a right in your wealth because you are not utilizing it appropriately. When you take wealth out of circulation and you hold it, you weaken the economy and you make people who are poor poorer, and it works against the financial system. But it works in your advantage, because as you hold this back, you are capable later on of waiting because you can afford to wait, you'll wait. And then when you're capable, you go ahead and you pounce on what becomes cheaper or what people cannot afford to buy anymore because you've been sitting on wealth. So Islam punishes that technically. You sit on wealth, it starts to decrease, not increase. If you see the difference. Today, if you have wealth, you sit it there, it'll grow more wealth. In Islam, you have wealth, you sit it there, it will decrease until you get up and do something with it. And like you go and you buy things, or you invest, or you start businesses, or you lend it to people. There's no zakat on lending. If you need money and I lend you the money, I don't have to pay zakat on that. That's a loan that I gave you. What I'm doing is I'm pumping money into the economy, so it's moving around. The money keeps on moving. Unless, of course, I'm lending it to you so I don't pay zakat, then I have to. If I lend it to you because I don't want to pay zakat, then we both owe. But if you need the money and I give it to you, then we don't owe zakat on it. So the problem is hoarding wealth, pulling it out of circulation and having it sit there for a long time. The Quran repeatedly links economic injustice to moral decay. The Quran always talks about how when there's no justice in wealth, that this is a problem. يَوْمَ يُحْمَى عَلَيْهَا فِي نَارِ جَهَنَّمَ فَتُكْوَى بِهَا جِبَاهُهُمْ وَجُنُوبُهُمْ وَظُهُورُهُم. Those who hoard wealth or take wealth that's not theirs, or cheat or lie to make money, how they قَوْلٌ مَعْرُوفٌ وَمَغْفِرَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِّن صَدَقَةٍ يَتْبَعُهَا أَذًى. The Quran is filled with this. It's always connected to the fact that you're ethicless. If you use money wrong, or if you accumulate it in the wrong way, if you hoard it, or if you sit on it and don't pay zakat, or you don't use it for khair, this is seen as an ethical problem. It's seen as an ethical issue, and that's very specific to how our economical system is looked at. Stagnant wealth is frowned upon. Is why zakat is on capital, not income. The main difference between how this country works and how we do. They tax your income. You could be making minimum wage, and they're taxing you on it. Meaning you are making less money not enough to finish the first 10 days of the month, and they're taking money from you, which is an absolutely insane thought. Instead of doing that, Islam says, no, don't tax people's income. Tax people's capital. Let them make some money first. Now that they've made money and they're no longer worried about tomorrow, tax that. Take from the wealth because they can afford it. Take from the wealth that's sitting there, but don't tax people who cannot afford to do what they want to do. Now, what does that cause in any economic system? For those who are wealthy to go look for a different place to invest their money. But Islam, in its philosophy, is okay with that. Like, we're willing to take that risk. If you don't want to participate, you want to take your money and leave. But then when you do that, you lose your status amongst us. So the problem here is that you can easily open a bank account somewhere in the Cayman Islands or something, and still be here. And still enjoy your free healthcare and enjoy health. That wouldn't be, in Islamic system, it wouldn't be acceptable. If your wealth is somewhere else, you are where your wealth is. Where's your money? Go be with your money. Go live with your money. You don't live away from your money. You don't put your money somewhere else and you live over here. That's not how it works. So that's, again, a very specific part of understanding Islamic philosophy. That if you're going to be in a certain place, then your wealth is going to be with you. Unless you're not capable of bringing it. For example, you were kicked out of your country and you own land there, and you can't go back, that's one thing. But for you to actually put your wealth somewhere else and live in one place, no. It's not going to be. And your zakat is going to be calculated based on the wealth that you've left somewhere else. So all of it will be calculated, and then you'll owe all of that. So it's no point of moving it to begin with. Understanding that poverty is not a romantic thing. It's not something that Islam sees to be beautiful. It's not beautified in Islam, and it's not sung about. Poverty is Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-faqri wal-kufr. And it's actually paired with kufr. It's something because it leads to it. Ongoing poverty leads to kufr, leads to people losing their deen. If they're always poor and they cannot make a living, they'll lose their iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala altogether. Society is responsible for making sure that doesn't happen, which is why we go back to the moral code again. We go back to the morality that is theocentric, coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If people continue to live in a low socioeconomic status, surrounded by people doing well, they will lose their faith, and they will lose their morals, and they will turn to criminality. So not only is it defeating the purpose of guidance, which is the main outcome that the deen is here for, what we hope to achieve for people, it's also selfishly going to harm you. So you have reason not to want that. You don't want people to be below a certain level, because if they are, then they're going to lose their moral code, lose their deen, and turn to criminality, which is going to end up harming you later on anyways. So instead of losing your wealth in an unlawful way and losing in an unregulated way, you lose it and you maintain people in a certain level where you don't, where you can afford for their moral code to stay the way it is. Productive effort, entrepreneurship, and trader honor. The Prophet himself was a merchant. This produces a fascinating tension: pursue wealth, but do not worship it. That is obvious. I'm not going to talk about that, but this is the spiritual piece of it, that you pursue wealth, you go after it, but هو في يدك لا في قلبك. It's in your hand, it's not in your heart. Right? Meaning it's not something that you worship and you just want more for the sake of wanting more. You want to accumulate more just for the sake of having more. Takathur is a problem. Alhaakum takathur. You're distracted by just pursuing more for the pure goal of just wanting more. Islam frowns down upon that. But pursuit of wealth is not a problem. Participate in markets, but do not let markets define your worth. So what is our financial philosophy? I'm going to put it in a few sentences here to help with help you understanding. Number one, so personal ownership is supported but seen as entrusted by God. That's how we define it. Equality of opportunity, not outcomes. So there has to be an equality of opportunity. So if you're disadvantaged by nature, we're going to set up a system for you so that it'll make up for your innate disadvantage by offering you less risk. In a system that will show you some rahmah, so that you're not disadvantaged every step of the way. Like you're poor, you're going to stay poor. Think about it. How hard it would it be in wealthy countries, had this system not been so corrupt, there should be no ghettos in wealthy countries. There shouldn't be. If the majority are wealthy and you have these little pockets of people who are unwealthy, it's not hard to get them out. It's just the system does not allow for it. Because this person is going to be born with no wealth. They're going to be born surrounded by crime, surrounded by ignorance. They're set up to fail from the beginning, and they don't have access to things that are going to allow them to get out. It's only recently that the function or the focus within the states and in Canada has been upon altruism a little bit more. A little bit more focused towards doing khair as a way to get people to support those who are in need. But really, Islam doesn't just leave it to that. Just leave it to the goodness of the hearts of people. No, Islam actually puts rules where you're forced to actually help these people. It's not up to you. It's a moral obligation, and it's a part of the economical system. The system cannot be rigged against the vulnerable. It must be designed to protect the wealth of the wealthy and assist the disadvantaged to accumulate wealth, because there's enough to go around. That's a part of our financial philosophy, that there's enough to go around for everyone's needs. It's just not enough. There's not enough to go around for everyone's greed, right? There's enough to go around for everyone's need, just not for everyone's greed. And that's the problem. Markets today are built to satisfy greed and not need. And that's a big problem that exists within the world today. Stagnant wealth and capital is taxed annually, not the income, and that's what zakat is. Riba usury is impermissible for many reasons. I explained to you that risk-free profit piece is where we stand our ground as Muslims, where we say this is wrong, this system is wrong. You can't have wealth sitting there that's just generating wealth. For us, wealth sits there and it loses it decreases. This year, 2,500. Next year, 2,400. Next year, within a few years, you paid off. You paid $20,000 from 100. Sitting on money is not. You're discouraged to do it, even by the law itself. You're discouraged spiritually. You're discouraged economically, and then legally, you're discouraged by we're going to keep on taking away from it. Shared risk is a condition for generating wealth. This is a condition within Islam. You have to establish that you're both carrying risk. That's why all the uqud, and this is a legal maxim, by the way. I'm just using the English wording for it, but if you go back, you'll find what I mean. Every aqd, every contract within buyu' in fiqh is going to be assessed by the jurist, looking at who's carrying the risk here. If I own the land, and you're going to work in it, we have to judge how are we going to calculate the risk here. Because I can't carry the whole risk, and neither can you. So we have to figure it out. So they come up with muzara'a, they come up with musaqa, they come up with qiral, they come up with all these different systems, so that if I have the money and you're going to work with the money, you're going to do something for me, unless I'm hiring you, I'm paying you a salary. Come work for me in this. I'm the manager. I'm in charge. But if it's not employment, it's like, no, I want to work and I want some autonomy in my work and I want to make some money. I want to actually have some ownership. So the jurists have to sit down, and what they're really doing is just calculating risk. Who is carrying more risk and less risk, and how can we balance it out so it's more fair? And when they feel that it's not fair, that one party is carrying way more risk than what is reasonable, they will make this aqd haram. So a lot of the uqud that are haram in Islam may not come from the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ, but will come from the philosophy of the economical system and the jurists' understanding of it. And the more they appreciate that, the better and the more refined their contracts will look. That's why to be honest, the Maliki are very good at this, because they were ahead of the game when it came to understanding the economical system. So their uqud are way more mature. Historically, they were always more mature. Taxation is permissible as needed for communal requirements. It's not haram in Islam. I just want to point that out. Al-dariba or al-jibaya was not haram. There could be taxation on your wealth or on your income, aside from zakat, that was based on communal requirements. It went beyond al-fuqara wal-masakin wal-amilina alayha wal-mu'allafati qulubuhum. Outside of that, if you needed to build a hospital or build a school or you wanted transportation, this is something that is acceptable Islamically. Hoarding, gambling, right? Market manipulation, all of that is impermissible. It's impermissible. Legally, it's illegal, and Islamically, it's impermissible, and spiritually, it's seen to be dirty. So it aligns the moral code with and that's an important piece, because here, there may be things that are illegal, but people socially think it's cool. Like if you were able to make money that way, good for you. If you're able to figure something out and make money, even though it's illegal, but you got away with it, people won't see that as something bad. No, Islamically, it's seen as haram, meaning if you do it, if the legal system doesn't catch you, then the moral system will. Meaning people will say, oh, that's mal haram, you're not marrying my daughter. Or that's mal haram, I'm taking my daughter and my grandchildren back because I have you feeding mal haram. And society will ostracize you and kick you out. So which is very important, because here it's not like that. Here, no, there are a lot of illegal things, but if you make money illegally, no one's upset. Everyone's clapping for you. You made money. It's not frowned upon socially or morally, unless obviously it's theft or you're going and break an entry or something. But aside from that, a lot of market manipulation and hoarding wealth and gambling. This is all good. People are not rational utility maximizers. This is a very important term that I came to learn over the last 3 or 4 years. I had to rational utility maximizers, meaning people are seen as beings that are always calculating how to make more money. And they'll make decisions not based on the purity of the decision, not based on the moral code of the decision, not based on the collective benefit of the decision, but only how to increase their own wealth. That's it. There's no other metric. I mean, human beings will only make decisions that will increase their own wealth, and that's it. They're always trying to maximize the utility of their wealth at all times. Islam doesn't see people that way. Just saying that Islam does not accept that because you can, if you did that, if you always did that in a court of law here, you would not be faulted, but in an Islamic court of law you would be, because you're expected in the Islamic court of law to be a morally tested human being who is trying to navigate temptation, that you're morally accountable, and that if you did always try to maximize, then that was a loss. You were lost to your own temptation, to your own desires, and you could be held accountable for that. This requires a moral code to guide the markets to begin with. What moral codes guide markets today? If it sells, you make it. That's the moral code. Does it sell? Then you manufacture it. You make it. That's not how Islamic markets work. Just because people buy it doesn't mean that it's worth being made. Just because people will put money behind it doesn't mean that it's okay to actually manufacture it and sell it. Because sex sells. It sells really, really well. There's nothing that sells better than it. It doesn't mean it's okay to manufacture and sell. It doesn't mean that it's okay to exist within a market. Regulated or unregulated, it doesn't mean that that's okay because it's morally inferior and it's problematic. If it's harming the environment, then you should not be allowed to manufacture it or sell it. If you're proving that this is harming people, then you shouldn't be able to make it to begin with. But free markets that have no moral guide, none of that will matter. If it sells, make it, and then it becomes really hard to hit the brakes on that. Right? It's very hard to hit the brakes on that. We are literally watching the world fry, and we're still talking about the prices of Nift al-Kham and gas and all that stuff. The planet is, we are losing this battle really quickly. I regret having children. Wallahi al-azim. No offense to Ahmed. I regret bringing kids into this world because I don't know what am I going to leave them? What am I leaving for them? I'm leaving to them one big wasteland that was avoidable. That was avoidable. We didn't have to be there, but when markets are not governed by any form of morality, this is what you end up with, and this is a big problem. I'm not saying Muslims are better than it. We're just as bad as everyone else. I'm talking about the Islamic philosophy. Please differentiate between what Islamic philosophy is and how Muslims behave. It's a huge difference. Quick comparison. Compared to classical liberal capitalism, Islam agrees on private property markets but rejects moral neutrality and absolute autonomy. We talked about that. Compared to socialism, Islam shares concern for distributive justice but rejects abolition of ownership and coercive leveling. Coercive leveling, everyone has to be the same, it rejects that. Compared to pure utilitarianism, Islamic thought grounds morality not in aggregate happiness, not in just an outcome and people making more money, but in accountability to the divine subhanahu wa ta'ala and objective justice. So it's not just in how you make more money. That's not just the goal. No, there's more to it than that. The goal is not, Islam's financial philosophy is therefore teleological. I mean, yes, it's goal-oriented. We're trying to achieve a goal, but the goal is not just increasing the GDP. No, it's in a society that nurtures moral agents and is just. So we're not always just trying to get more money. No, we're trying to make sure that we're just and that people are morally well as long as the basic needs are fulfilled. It's not driven purely by GDP, which almost every country is driven by nothing but just want to increase the amount of money that's coming in. Those who work hard and obtain more wealth will be protected, but they must obtain it in a morally correct manner. The wealthy still must share the risk when wanting to grow their wealth and are not allowed to hoard, conduct usury, or manipulate markets. So even when you have money, you still have to share risk as you move forward. You want to grow your money, you have to share risk. You can't conduct usury, and you can't manipulate markets. The economical system is designed to assist people to improve their socioeconomic status and ensure their basic needs are met through zakat. That's the basis of the So let's go through the social philosophy quickly because we run out of time. How human beings are viewed as morally accountable agents. I already talked to you about this. The human beings are seen as morally accountable beings. They have the ability to understand morality and they're accountable to it. And society is not merely a contract for mutual advantage. No. The societal contract is something much more deep than that. The Islamic social contract is more than just mutual benefit for both. No, it's more than that. It's a moral community ordered towards ethical flourishing. Family, neighborhood, community institutions matter deeply. Radical individualism, where the self is the final authority, is rejected. However, so is totalitarianism, absorption of the individual into the state. So the state's role is not to dominate markets or erase individuality. No, it's there to preserve justice, ensure fairness in transactions, and protect the vulnerable and maintain moral order. That's why we have the collective. That's why we have law. That's why we try to work as a group, because we want to make sure that we have to protect the vulnerable. We all know that, because if you don't care about that, it's just because you were born without into privilege and you don't have someone vulnerable in your life. But if you do, the moment you have vulnerability yourself or you love someone who's vulnerable, suddenly this matters to you a lot, and you care about it quite deeply. Historically, institutions like waqf, and I'm talking about it here instead of talking about it in the economical system, because I think this is where it fits better. Waqf was a huge part of the Islamic world and of the Islamic growth of societies. It's a part of the economical system, but it really affected how societies functioned. Because endowment foundations, it decentralized welfare networks. It took it away from just the rich asking. By the way, fundraising is a term that was used for, if I want to go on a trip with my son somewhere, right? So I fundraise for it because I can't afford it. That's what fundraising was. You want to do something for yourself or your family, so you fundraise for it. The idea of calling what we do in our communities as fundraising is morally problematic. I am not fundraising in this masjid. I am happy. I have enough space in this masjid. See, I'm sitting right here. I'm very comfortable. And I can sit over there, I'll be more comfortable. I'm totally fine. It's the people who don't have space in the masjid. So this is not fundraising. This is not fundraising. Do you want a masjid where you can fit? Then buy it. You don't? Then don't. It's not fundraising. Fundraising makes it seem as if I need funds. I don't need funds. I don't want funds. Do you want funds? Then go ahead and put the money and bring it and buy something. The idea has to be flipped. I don't need money for, the people who are working with me, we're totally fine. Alhamdulillah, Allah kafina, Allah ghanina, we don't need wealth, and we have enough space to run our things. I don't need money. I don't need space either. Do you? I'm running programs. I can take 50, 60 students. I'm happy. I'm teaching them, taking care of them. I fit within those programs. Do you think there should be more space? Do people, are you hoping for more availability? If you are, then pay for it. It's not fundraising. Fundraising is a very Western concept that started, yes, now today it's used in that context everywhere. But when it first was used, it was not used for that. Like at the school, if grade 8 wants to go on a trip, what do? They fundraise. Are they going to take the whole school with them? No, they're going to go them. They're going to ask people to give money for something that's specific for them. That's fundraising. This is not fundraising. This is not fundraising. That's not what it is. This is you are paying for services you want. You are growing your own community. You're growing your own facilities. You're making sure that there's a future for yourself and your kids. That's what you're doing. That's not fundraising. Which is why we had waqf. Hajj, beautiful. It's coined by the Islamic law. It doesn't exist anywhere else. Concept of endowment foundations did not exist prior to Islam bringing it forward. It spread into Europe and the West through the Islamic thought. I can very, very confidently say that to you without so waqf is something very specific to Islam. We live here in these societies and we don't have a lot of awqaf. And that's something that needs to change if we're going to get better. Because that's how you fund schools and hospitals and roads and animal shelters. That's civil society centuries before the phrase existed. You had a civil society that was taking care of itself. We took money, we put it in a place that was owned by no one. It was owned by everyone. It was owned by God. Owned by the divine. No one can touch it. It will generate wealth for everyone and distribute it amongst those who need it. Your job is just to distribute it fairly, but you don't own it. No one owns it. It's a beautiful thing. I tell people, you make a waqf in your life. If you own a restaurant, a table should be waqf. If you own a taxi company, one of the cars should be waqf. You run a clinic, one of the days should be waqf. Whatever you do, you work 7 days a week, 5 days a week, one of those days, half of the day, make it waqf. Lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's owned by Allah, you just give it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The awqaf is so important, it's so powerful. It held the Muslim society during wars and famine and revolutions and political systems fighting with each other. What kept people alive during these times were awqaf, and the society who didn't have awqaf, they disappeared. And they died, and they had problems, and they immigrated, and they moved to other places where that had awqaf. This is a whole different topic that will take a long time to explain, but I encourage you to think about it as a part of the Islamic philosophy, the concept of endowment funds. The Islamic social contract is not merely among self-owning individuals. No, it is a moral community accountable to God. Authority is not manufactured by consent alone. It is constrained by transcendent law. The collective protects the rights of the individual. The collective is going to protect the rights of every individual. That's the social contract. And the individual will feed back all of his, will feed back with volunteering, with awqaf, with zakat, back into the collective. So it's not the society trying to erase your individualism, and it's not the individual becoming more important than the society. It's a mutual growth figure or equation, where the society makes sure that you're protected. You don't lose your wealth, you don't lose your freedom, you don't lose, but then you are strengthening the collective for it to continue to do that for people who come later. That single shift from we decide morality to we discover morality changes the equation. Modern individualism treats the self as primary. And identity is self-defined. The good life is often framed as self-expression. Islamic social philosophy sees the individual as morally autonomous by metaphysically dependent. You are free but not self-originating. You are accountable. The self is not sovereign, it is entrusted. So this is how we view the social contract. And these phrases, I've run out of time, so I'm going to jog through this and you can read it on your own time. These phrases are very transformative within social contracts. When you study the work of Hobbes and Jean-Jacques Rousseau and you listen to their social contracts, you find that what Islam is actually talking about is much more mature. And why? Because it's always grounding things in theocentric moralism. It's always grounding everything in theocentric morality. Because if you have a source of morals and you're going to follow it, then that will shape how you see yourself within the society and how the society sees you. This avoids two extremes. Number one, radical individualism, where society becomes optional and moral truth becomes subjective. And collectivism, where the individual dissolves into the state class, meaning you're just a soldier. You have no real value. And we see that. We see what happened. I live in a country like that. You can go take a look at what North Korea does, and that's what collectivism looks like. And then you have this radical individualism, where everyone decides whatever they want to decide. Everyone decides to be whatever they want to be and identify however they want to identify and choose whatever they want to choose and live however they want to, with almost no care about how society actually functions. I'm going to leave this here because I'm not going to. The comparison is with Marxism and it's, and with capitalism or nationalism. So you can take a look at these if you're interested. But the last piece here is what I think is powerful. Islamic social philosophy does not ground solidarity in ethnicity or race or nation state. No, the primary bond is moral commitment. The primary bond is faith and moral commitment. This produces a transnational ethical community. That's what the word ummah is. This is the proper translation, in my opinion, of ummah. When I say the word ummah, I'm talking about transnational ethical community. Muslims, which you see around you right now. People from all across the world. It's not based on nationalism. It's not based on race or ethnicity. And what binds us is the ethics that we all adhere to. And the source of those ethics, who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm not saying ethics, never ever disconnect ethics from God. Ethics come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I say ethics, I am talking about Him subhanahu wa ta'ala because He's the source of it. So when I say ethical community or ethical society, I am talking about one that is grounded in the theocentric moralism that comes from the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala. The transnational ethical community, ummah, is the highest collective identity that we have. We belong to it. You have to make sure your kids belong to it, that they understand how important it is to belong to it. Protecting the collective supersedes the individual. The collective protects the individual's rights, and personal freedom is overruled when there is communal harm. All of these are topics that would require a little bit of explanation. I'm going to move on from them. The last piece here is what I think is important. The norms of society will be respected and accepted as part of law. Societal norms are important. Al-urf and al-'ada are parts of Islamic law. They're legal maxims. We will turn to them. When we don't have a nas in the Quran and the Sunnah, we'll turn, what is the urf? What are the social norms? What are the social laws? What have people accepted to be a part of their lives? As long as they don't contradict religious rulings, they have value. The word ma'ruf and the word munkar are not religious terms. They are social terms. Halal and haram, those are religious terms. Wajib and la yajuz or muharram, those are religious terms. Ma'ruf and munkar, these are social terms. It's what people see. That you come to society, you see what their ma'ruf is. Most of their ma'ruf is going to be aligned with the halal and the wajib in your deen. Strengthen that. There's going to be a small piece where there's disagreement. Their ma'ruf is your haram. That's where reform comes in. That's where moral reform comes in. That's the real fight, is to change that piece. That you seem to see something correct, and we have evidence that it's not correct, and we're going to push back. You come see what their munkar looks like. Their munkar and your haram is very much aligned. Work on that, it's easy. But there's going to be a small slither where their munkar is something that you think is correct and good, and that's where islah, that's where reform comes in. Moral reform is brought in. That's what prophets did. They came and they pushed back against that which people had normalized as good, but that wasn't. Or normalized as bad, that wasn't. But there's so much in common aside from that allows us as Muslims to participate socially in any society that we live in. It's a beautiful piece of our philosophy. Ethical coherence will guide all social encounters and judge their validity. I'll end with that, inshallah ta'ala. Forgive me for taking longer than I was supposed to. Subhanaka bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammad wa alihi ajma'in. Tomorrow will be much shorter for sure. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.